Welcome back. Now, media practitioners under the coalition African Journalists Against Genocide has condemned the Israeli intentional and deliberate targeting of Palestinian colleagues in Gaza. The coalition of African journalists from across the continent said that it was joining other voices around the globe to express its disapproval of Israel's prolonged action in Gaza, especially the murdering of journalists who were simply doing their job. Now, AJAG was created by Nigerian broadcast journalist Ireti Bakare-Yusuf, and it, of course, as mentioned, brings together journalists and media personnel from over 20 African countries. She joins me now via Zoom from Lagos in Nigeria. Ireti, absolute pleasure having you on. Thank you so much for joining us.
It's a pleasure to be here with you, Farhaz. Thank you.
No, it's an absolute pleasure. Ireti, the voice from Africa, it's important, isn't it, given our colonial history? How important was this, not just this creation of the group, but the discussions that happen within it in order to make sure that the support is given to our colleagues in Gaza?
No, like you said, it's incredibly important that Africa, especially given our history and our experience with colonialism, not just the experience, but the violence perpetrated by colonialists, violence of which we still live with today in our economy, in our socializing, even in our relationship, in our Pan-African relationships with ourselves. So we know what colonialism does. We know what disgusting, violent, brutal occupation is like. So in the group, I mean, as you could see, so many people were like, oh my God, I've been looking for a space like this. I've been looking for a space to get together with other African journalists just so we could come together as one voice, speak our truth, speak our frustration, and importantly, stand in solidarity as one with the people of Palestine and intrinsically with our colleagues in Gaza. So when, and it's interesting, this question that you asked me, because if I go back to last year, 2023, when October 7th happened, I was the first to start doing a show, my show, Borderlines, which comes on every Friday on Nigeria Info, was specifically created in order to educate the global South about what was going on. Because immediately, as you know, one of the legacies that colonialism left us was Abrahamic religions. So everybody were thinking, oh, this is Muslim versus Christian. They didn't care to learn about the religion. You had pastors coming out like one of the biggest pastors in Nigeria, that Redeemed Church, whose name Adeboye, that's it, coming out on Twitter and saying, Israel, God, Christianity. So it occurred to me very quickly that, oh my word, there needed to be an education. We need to educate the citizens to know that this has nothing to do with religion, even though I don't care for religion, but that's neither here nor there. This isn't about religion. This is about history. This is about fact. This is about violence. This is about colonialism. This is about occupation. Indeed, this is about theft. This is a crime that should connect with every single African, primarily because we know what colonialism is like. So I had my first interview with the Israeli ambassador for Nigeria. Prior to him coming on my show, he had other interviews with Nigerian stations. And, they were all like, oh, how is it going? Then he comes on my show and I'm challenging him. I am literally challenging him. You cannot lie to me. My sister was just in Gaza, I beg your pardon, was just in Palestine, May 2023. And then October 7th happened. So not only had I grown up, because I grew up in England, had I grown up with the stories and watching on TV, thinking as a child, if I may digress, I would watch as a child and I'll be like, I don't understand. One side has got, submachine guns and those armored vehicles. And the other side is just throwing a stone. As a child, I always used to think, this doesn't make sense. There's
Yes.
something wrong here, you know. So of course, you know, as I grew up, I learned more. And, you know, I had like my sister, when we're in the UK, she would go on, you know, pro-Palestine matches and stuff like that. This was back in university. So coming back to 2023, she had just come back. She was in Palestine in May with the group, the literary group for the Palestinian Literature Festival, which one of the American authors ended up writing a book about it. So she had come back, and my sister literally is one of those people. She's very pacifist, but she hates violence. She would always preach anti-violence. Before October 7th, I remember my sister coming back. It took her 2 weeks to recover from what she had seen. But even more so, she said to me, she said, never in my life will I preach against violence when somebody is under the cloud of violence.
Yes.
Never
Ireti,
again. Palestine changed that for her.
Ireti, I have to stop you there because I want to obviously bring what had happened last week, the murder of Anas al-Sharif and his colleagues. We're seeing the pictures they're playing on our screen. One of the videos was taken by Amr Sultan, who we learned today had collapsed due to exhaustion, due to obviously no food, the starvation. For a media practitioner to work under these conditions, and yet there's still bombs that are being dropped by Israel. Talk to us from a media practitioner's perspective, and of course I can relate to it, the difficulty of doing your job just by maybe the minor issues, but the major issues that Palestinian journalists are going through right now, it's as probably unheard of as we've ever seen in this century right now.
As a journalist, where I was going before was, I was the only Nigerian journalist that was invited to Israel after October 7th. So when I heard, every time I heard that a Palestinian journalist had been killed in Gaza, it will always go over my head that that could have been me had they allowed us into Gaza. Now, when Anas died, I couldn't control myself anymore. I felt like something in me had died. I cried, but then I woke up. I dried my tears and I thought, I've got to do something. This cannot continue. You know, the first thing is, there needs to be a voice. We need to speak out. Now, Anas was literally, it was almost like the catalyst, the enough is enough, as we say it. And it wasn't just Anas, whom I had been watching. I watch Al Jazeera all the time. I had been watching him. I would watch, you know, his reports, and I would always think to myself, oh, this lovely young man is so talented. He's so gifted, you know, he's so brave. But then it wasn't Anas that was killed. It was Anas and 4 others. And Israel had the audacity, the licensed audacity to come out and say, yes, we did it. Because what? Because we believe he's Hamas, without zero evidence. So I haven't taken on the Israeli ambassador on my show. And I was very unprofessional. But again, this is not about being professional. I made it clear to my listeners, as I said to him, this is personal. And I'm being biased here. And I have every right to be biased because you've just killed one of 5 of my colleagues again. And that's how we must look at this. The fact that every time a journalist is killed in Gaza, and they don't all work for Al Jazeera, this is the thing. Every journalist that is killed in Gaza, one of us is killed. When they are not safe, we are not safe, which is what led me to create AJAG, African Journalists Against Genocide, because we can call it a genocide. It is now totally inarguable that it is a genocide. But even more so, it's not just a genocide. Now it's a media side because they are killing media practitioners.
After the break, my conversation with Ireti continues as we discuss how the media perspective of the coverage of this Gaza genocide is being viewed. Where is media freedom, especially for journalists in Gaza, and how are other media houses, especially within the West, covering this genocide? Do stay tuned. Welcome back. I'm still in conversation with Ireti Bakare-Yusuf. She is the founder of African Journalists Against Genocide. Ireti, I want to talk on the way this genocide is obviously being covered. Now, what we see from, of course, Western media is a more pro-Israeli approach that has occurred. We've seen a bit of a change to it in the last few weeks when, of course, CNN, which was probably as pro-Israeli as you could get, the BBC, which was probably as pro-Israeli as you can get, going into areas like, for example, the West Bank, and I know obviously it's two different parts of Palestine, and filming, for example, Israeli settlers' attacks on villages. If media houses like that can go ahead and say, well, we're actually seeing it for what it is, we can say that there's a slight light at the end of the tunnel for media from a global perspective, can we?
I'm not quite sure, actually. So I'm not one of those who think, these Western media houses, Western, huge podcast platforms like Piers Morgan, because they finally found their conscience in the bin where they dropped it, and now sticking it back on them, trying to course correct. I'm not going to give them praise for it, actually. The fact that BBC is now trying to course correct, they don't get praise from me or CNN, or indeed not Sky News. What they do get is, well, okay, go ahead and do your job. You've just woken up to know what your job is. Your job was always to be accurate. Your job was never to actually give oxygen to the Israeli narrative just because they are, the Israeli government is friends with the UK. If they were worth their certification or, their reputation in journalism that they have and the big monies that they have, then they would have been doing a better job in the first place. So you've got to ask yourself, who are the people behind these organizations? Clearly, they are friends of Zionism. And I'm going to say this, there's no hiding behind it. But indeed, 2021 months on, yeah, it's human to now think, perhaps we shouldn't be. But you know what I'll tell you, Fahaz? Do you know what it is? It's violence. Their cause correct is a form of violence deletion in itself. And I'll tell you why. Listen to them. They only ever talk about children. Then they talk about mothers. Are Palestinian men not important?
Exactly.
Do they not matter? And this is coming from an African feminist. So you see, it's all by design, by, deliberate and division. So no, I'm not going to give them a clap just because, Stuart Ramsey went to the West Bank, and filmed what we all know has been happening for years. Where were they during the Second Intifada? Where were they? Where were they when Palestinians, all they did peacefully was to stand by that hideous wall and say, look, we deserve our freedom. We want our right of return. Where were these people when Palestinians did not carry guns? They didn't have any ammunition. They just stood there, and Israeli, occupied forces were shooting at them. Why didn't the West carry it then? Where was their outrage then? It didn't exist. So no, they don't get a pass from me. They just get on with it and don't bore me.
Ireti, I want to go to 2022, Shireen Abu Akleh, and of course you would know just when the murder of her happened. And I want to go to the United States of America because, of course, it sells us. It's this bastion of democracy. And nothing has happened. Absolutely nothing till today, even when it was found that she was killed by Israeli security forces. And when you look now, 3 years later, close to 300 journalists have been killed, and yet, no, it's just an error that was made. You have to think to yourself, my word, is this not hypocrisy on the highest level?
It's insanity. It's absolute insanity. It's cruelty on another level. In fact, that hypocrisy is so sinister that it reminds us, and it must remind us, and I'll say this to every one of my colleagues that's watching, and every citizen of Africa that's watching, that sinister hypocrisy should remind us that we must stay in a place of outrage. Do not be calm about this. You see, when Shireen was killed, one of the ways that we Africans let Shireen down was we didn't go into outrage, right? And we allowed Israel to get away with it for too long. And every African government, every African journalist, union of journalists demanded that the Israeli ambassador either be summoned to the presidency or be expelled until justice is done for Shireen. We may not be here today. Now, it's easy for people who are listening to say, well, Africa doesn't really have that much power. That's not true. We do. America might be the biggest country, the most powerful country in the world. America might be the only one that can control Israel. But I assure you, if Africa didn't have any powers, they wouldn't still be coming for us for neocolonization, economic neocolonization part 2. They need all our resources for the digital age. They don't have it in their backyard, right? So that's why we must stay in a place of outrage. We must not allow them to get away with this thin, veiled, shallow, white savior, narratives. No. Shireen, what Israel only just, was it this year, accepted that they killed Shireen. It's taken 3 years. 3 years. Initially. And why did they accept? Because documentaries were done. You have sites like Double Down News and all the other sites that speak truth to power. They did documentaries. They bothered to show that Israel, that she was targeted, that this woman, this wonderful, courageous, talented woman was targeted. And so the hypocrisy is not just your average hypocrisy. It's a sinister hypocrisy. And it is designed to shut us, to keep us quiet. It is designed to feed us, crumbs in order for us to be calm. As journalists, we must not become, yes, I give my platform to both sides. That's journalism. But when it comes to narrative representation, we must challenge every narrative that gives oxygen to the Zionist Israeli government.
Ireti, one final question. What more needs to be done from a larger African perspective? Of course, there is this group, there is this forum. South Africa has, of course, taken Israel to the International Court of Justice. But what more needs to be done from African leaders? I mean, what needs to be done from, of course, your country, from President Bolo Tinobo, to say, well, not just cutting ties with Israel, but joining in, for example, in ICC cases or ICJ cases, to make sure that full accountability is being presented to Israel so that those answers are being given, and the accurate, right answers?
It's an interesting question that you asked me especially regarding African leaders and my country, Nigeria in particular. Nigeria continues to have a relationship with Israel. And just last week, so Nigeria sells oil to Israel. Just last week, it came out in the news. It is reported that Nigeria may be about to sign yet another big contract, security contract with Israel. and the Israeli deputy or VP of Foreign Affairs was actually here. Interestingly, they never take her to let her talk to the news, but hopefully I will get her one of these days, to the press rather. Now, what needs to happen? First and foremost, I would say to you, interestingly, the other thing that we buy from Israel is spyware, right? So 3 countries supply Nigeria spyware: China, Russia, and Israel. I think Israel is the largest supplier. So just think about that. Now, what is it that they need to do? Immediately for me, the one thing my President Bola Ahmed Tinubu can do is to expel the Israeli ambassador with immediate effect. And then let questions be asked, because then you will force them to the table and discussions can begin. Look, I'm not some naive socialist that doesn't understand that there's diplomacy and there's economic diplomacy, and that my country effectively needs money. Indeed, Africa needs money. But Africa has the power to negotiate better, even if they do need money. We have a saying in Yoruba, and then I'll translate it in English. In Yoruba, they say, and what that means, it literally means, is we are not going to call a cow a human being just because we want to eat meat, right? So it means that you have the power to negotiate. Yes, we all want to eat meat, but we're not going to bow down to the cow because we want to eat meat. We're not called the cow brother because we want to eat meat. So we have to actually realize, actualize, and believe in the power that Africa holds. The economic powers, not just the social powers, the economic powers that Africa holds, which is also supported by its huge population of young people. Right? If we can just realize that, we will realize that however big America is, even America needs Africa, and they all need us. So for as long as somebody continues to need you, the power is in your hand. So what I'd like from my president is with immediate effect to actually expel the Israeli ambassador in Nigeria. Nigeria has always said we stand for the 2-state solution. Incidentally, Nigeria, Hamas is not prescribed as a terrorist organization in Nigeria. They can't come into Nigeria as far as I know, because I've interviewed them in this country. But that is not good enough. To continue to play lip service is not good enough. This is at a point where every country, every president, every human being has to put themselves behind, they have to put effort behind their words. You can't, it's not enough to just condemn or to speak like slimy David Lammy and say, oh, I am concerned. I am deeply concerned. No, you are not. Because if you were deeply concerned, you would have cut off ties. You wouldn't still be selling parts of F-16 jets to the UK and to Israel, right? You still wouldn't be friends with you wouldn't be connected to Friends of Israel in the UK. And all these other things. So it's incumbent on every single one of us. If you care about humanity, indeed you have to put humanity first. And when you put humanity first, you don't just put your country first, you put every single person first, including those who support Palestine that live in Israel.
Ireti, unfortunately, we have come towards the end of this conversation. Absolute pleasure having you on. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
That's Ireti Bakare-Yusuf. She is the founder of African Journalists Against Genocide. That's all we have for you here on News in Focus. If you've missed today's episode, do be sure to find it on our YouTube channel, Hilaal TV. From myself, Ross Bedell, and the rest of the team in Johannesburg, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.